Hello, everybody, and welcome to today's Dice Grand Rounds. Today's treat is really special one for a lot of us that have been in the department for a while and grew up and got to know Dr. Natalie Cort when she was here as a young psychology intern. As some of you might know, Dr. Cort received her BA degree in psychology from Binghamton and then came to the University of Rochester where she received her master's in clinical psychology. Subsequently, she received her PhD right here and did her postdoctoral fellow in the Program of Research and Innovation in Disparity Education with the Department of Psychiatry and with a couple of doctors here, Paul Rubens. She also worked with Eric Kane in the National Research Service Award Fellow, and she was a research fellow in the department right up to the time that she moved away and went to William and James, where she has continued to be a bright star there and to do incredible work. Dr. Natalie Cort is a licensed clinical psychologist, is an associate professor in clinical psychology, and the co-director of the Center for Multicultural and Global Mental Health at William James College. She directs the Black Mental Health Graduate Academy, a mentoring program to cultivate Black leaders in the psychology and mental health counseling fields. Additionally, she is associate director and co-principal investigator of the WJC's Specialized Training and Academic Retention Fellowship funded by the Health Resources and Service Administration. Furthermore, Dr. Cort was recently appointed to direct the WJC's newly launched institution-wide Teaching Faculty Fellowship. Dr. Cort is a research-grade psychiatric diagnostician, has been an investigator, consultant, clinician on 10 research trials funded by the National Institute of Mental Health and Substance Abuse and Mental Health Service Administration. She has authored journal articles and a practitioner guide on racial ethnic differences in youth mental health, child abuse reporting practices, high-risk sexual behaviors, age discordant sexual relationships, and depression treatment outcomes. Finally, through her company, Cort Consulting, Dr. Cort provides professional development trainings and consultation to ensure that promotion of culturally responsive organizational policies and the institution of equitable and inclusive practices in clinical research and training. And I forgot to add that this is a webinar, so you will not be able to use the chat. However, please feel free to use the Q&A button to put in questions for Dr. Cort. At the end of the session, you will have a link so that you can obtain CME from this session. Thank you very much. And I don't want to hold it up any longer. Dr. Cort, welcome.
Thank you so much. Thank you for such a kind and warm welcome. I am really excited to be here as an alum of the University of Rochester, as well as the University of Rochester Medical Center. It's an honor. So today I am going to be sharing a bit about what I've been doing since I left U of R. And the title of my talk today is, If You Build It, They Will Come: Changing Institutional Culture Through Transformative, Ethical, and Inclusive Educational Practices. My hope is that this is going to be an informative talk, and I look forward to questions that you might have at the end of it. So Dr. Olivares shared a bit about my background and what I've been doing post U of R. And I want to share with you all that my background as an immigrant from a multi-ethnic Afro and Indo-Caribbean culture in Guyana, South America, has really been key in spurring my commitment to challenging ethnocentric and monoculturalistic research, pedagogical, clinical training practice. And I've been really fortunate to pursue my desire across multiple professional roles and in multidimensional ways. And that's in large part due to my experiences at the University of Rochester, at the Medical Center, two of my research fellowships at U of R focused on examining racial ethnic disparities in the field. And that has definitely been foundational for me and the work that I continue to do. So I have great gratitude to the University of Rochester as well as the Medical Center. So in terms of my objectives for today, I'm interested in highlighting to you some of the key disparities that impact the lives of racial ethnic minority communities. And I'm particularly interested in mental health disparities. So I'm going to be sharing just briefly the burden of those disparities on families. I'm also going to be presenting to you strategies that we have utilized at William James College that have proven effective at recruiting as well as retaining students from underrepresented communities. And my hope is that at the end of this talk, you all appreciate the utility of developing culturally focused academic programs and training opportunities for all students. So I want to highlight the fact before we move forward that we live in a country built on racial oppression, which feeds the contemporary disparities that I'm going to be talking about. And that reality of racial oppression tends to be a bitter pill for many of us to swallow, but it is nonetheless a fundamental truth of this country. And that includes the removal of Indigenous people from their lands onto prisoner of war camps, the trafficking and enslavement of Africans, including African children, racial terror and violence post-Reconstruction, as well as legally sanctioned racial segregation and subordination during Jim Crow. All of these experiences reveal painful truths about this country's history of racial inequity. And for many of us in the mental health field, this history is a challenging and difficult topic for us to address. However, our collective failure to do so undermines our ability to provide effective care for all. And as such, it's important for us to recognize where we come from, and in this case, recognize that we stand on Indigenous lands. And I want to extend our respect to the citizens of tribal nations who live here today and whose ancestors lived and died here over 500 generations. So thank you for permitting me to do that. So my first objective today is to briefly provide a background to the work that we do at William James College to reduce disparities in the mental health field and to diversify the mental health workforce. I am always happy and passionate about opportunities to educate and to increase awareness about these issues. I'm passionate about them because our patients, our fellow citizens, our brothers, our sisters come to us in incredible pain and in desperation oftentimes. And they're seeking from us, mental health professionals, a safe and soft place to land. However, the disparities that we'll be talking about are not inevitable, but they do absolutely serve to increase the despair that is experienced by our patients, by our citizens, by our brothers and sisters. So we live in a country that is becoming increasingly multiracial, multi-ethnic, multicultural, multilinguistic. We live in a globalized society. And as an optimist, to me, that presents enriching opportunities for personal growth as well as organizational innovation. However, our field, the psychological field, the mental health counseling field, continues to struggle with quite persistent racial ethnic inequities in assessment, in clinical practice, as well as research training practices. And as a consequence, we need culturally proficient leadership to move us beyond the reality of our fields. So when discussing disparities, I generally reference two seminal reports. I'll talk only about one today. The other is called Unequal Treatment, and it was published in 2002 by the Institute of Medicine. If you haven't been aware of that report, you really should. But I'm going to be talking just briefly about President Bush's new Freedom Commission on Mental Health, which was put in place in 2002. And that report highlighted the ubiquitousness of racial and ethnic disparities in the mental health field. The commission found in their work that there were high rates of misdiagnosis, less use of evidence-based treatments, and more disproportionate use of involuntary psychological and psychiatric hospitalization that impacted the lives of racial ethnic minorities. And they highlighted too that the higher rates of misdiagnoses was incredibly burdensome on the lives of people of color and increased their experience of disability. The commission also highlighted that we, well-meaning, well-educated mental health professionals, contribute to what I unoriginally label the misdiagnosis to prison pipeline. And they made a statement that when I first read it, just took my breath away. They stated that we, mental health providers, our misunderstanding and misinterpretation of the behaviors of racial ethnic minorities have led to quite tragic consequences, including inappropriately placing minorities in the criminal and juvenile justice system. I recall that when I first read that, I was quite astonished by such a bold and disturbing statement. So I'll provide a brief example of what they were referring to. They were highlighting a pattern that we see across many psychiatric conditions and how we diagnose them, particularly in communities of color. So just briefly, children with attention deficit hyperactivity disorder who are from racial ethnic minority backgrounds are less likely to be accurately diagnosed with that condition when they really do have it. And even when they're presenting with more symptoms and risk factors for ADHD. When ADHD is untreated and the behavioral problems that one sees are untreated, it oftentimes gets viewed by educators as conduct disorders, signs of conduct disorders. In other words, those children are then labeled as bad kids, as disruptors, as children who refuse to listen to instruction, who refuse to pay attention in the classroom, thereby increasing the likelihood that those educators will apply academic disciplinary actions like suspensions, expulsions to those children that they believe are disrupting the classroom intentionally. Now, according to the Department of Education's Office of Civil Rights, students of color are disproportionately subjected to such actions, which are robustly associated with entry into the juvenile justice system. According to the Department of Justice, Black and Latinx youth are overrepresented in the juvenile justice system. And according to the DOJ, about 50 to 70% of youth in their systems have undiagnosed, misdiagnosed, and untreated mental health problems. So this is the misdiagnosis to prison pipeline that the commission in 2002 was highlighting. It's important to recognize that we, mental health providers, are at the beginning of that school to prison pipeline. And we are actively engaging in behaviors as a consequence of our implicit racial biases that lead to tragic consequences for young lives. So, according to the Institute of Medicine in 2002 in their report, they highlighted that, yes, the sources of disparities are vast. They're innumerable. They're rooted in contemporary and historic inequities. But they were very clear in their work, looking at disparities across the healthcare system broadly. They were very clear that the biases, the prejudices, the stereotypes that we mental health and healthcare providers hold impact the work that we do with communities of color to the detriment of those communities. So we have a responsibility to do no harm, but we're not adhering to that ethical necessity as we should. So there's much for us to do to improve the systems that we care about. And to do better, we must commit ourselves to engaging in a radically courageous anti-Black excavation of anti-Black, excavation of toxic anti-Asian, anti-Latinx, anti-Native American biases that live in all of us, because we are incompletely self-actualized human beings, but we can absolutely do the work to address those biases and how they impact the work that we do. I also want to emphasize that, yes, there is the issue of bias that we need to all work on, but that bias, the racial, ethnic biases that are replete in our field, in our world, really do not have opportunities to be challenged and dismantled if we do not have a mental health workforce, a behavioral health workforce, a psychiatry workforce, et cetera, that is diverse. So it is incredibly necessary for that those of us in leadership positions in academic institutions commit to diversifying our field. That will absolutely help with the levels of disparities that we see. So that brings me to William James College and how we have decided to lead that change. In the past decade, we've recognized that we have an outsized influence in the New England area. And as a consequence of our outsized influence, we must take on really the responsibility to change. So WJC is the largest regionally and nationally accredited educational institution of psychology and mental health counseling in New England. And we are very, very intentional about the work that we're doing to shift and change the existing ethnocultural and monoculturalistic system. We are happy to share with you that in the past year, we've been able to significantly increase the number of racial ethnic minority students that attend our school. And we are continuing to actively engage in the work necessary to continue improving that. So we made a decision to engage in a variety of pioneering and paradigm shifting initiatives focused on multicultural education. And our intention really is to improve the services that are provided to underserved communities and historically marginalized groups. So we've embarked on a number of different strategies that I will be sharing with you today. So given the growing needs of the field for graduate training of culturally proficient mental health providers and psychologists, in 2016, WJC developed the Center for Multicultural and Global Mental Health, which I co-direct with Dr. Jill Bloom. And this has been a critically important center, and I'll tell you a little bit about it. Our intention really is to address mental health disparities, not only in the US, but across the globe. And we recognize that pedagogical and training principles have remained unchanged. And Therefore, it is our responsibility to lead graduate training programs nationwide in providing specialized academic courses and training activities. And I want to just make a point of highlighting the photograph in this slide. What you're seeing here is a group of 5 women who've come together and who've developed a sisterhood, and whose sisterhood has been really impactful in leading this center and creating programs that have been successful at addressing disparities and diversifying the field. 2 of us are immigrants, 1 of us is a refugee, but as a collective, we are invested in our students and the communities that they serve. So the first strategy that I wanted to emphasize is that it's important for academic institutions, including mental health focused institutions, to create culturally focused academic concentrations and field training opportunities to address the issues of disparities that we have in our field. And so that's what we've done. So I'll share with you a couple of our concentrations. Within the Multicultural Center, we house 4 concentrations focused on African and Caribbean mental health, Latinx mental health, Asian mental health, and global mental health, which focuses on immigrants and refugees. Our intention with these pioneering programs is to provide our students with specialized, culturally informed clinical and organizational wellness services, training. So again, they can provide the necessary ethical care to historically underserved communities. We're happy to share with you that since 2017, we've enrolled 139 students across the 4 concentrations. Our Asian mental health program was inaugurated last year and has already been incredibly successful. We're very proud of it. I also want to highlight that our Latinx mental health program has acted really as a guide to the development of the other concentrations. Within the concentrations, we provide our students with a variety of didactic courses that are really designed to raise their knowledge and awareness of the ways in which inequities are historically and socially produced. And those courses are meant also to highlight to our students how poverty, racism, and social exclusion exert powerful influences on the emotional and social well-being of individuals, families, and communities across the globe. We also require that students within our concentrations utilize their brilliance to engage in scholarship that amplifies issues that have been neglected, that impact the lives of cultural minority and immigrant communities. And in addition to engaging in scholarly work focused on issues reflective of those communities' experiences, our students are also expected over the course of their training at WJC to provide services to at least to immigrants, to cultural minorities, to racial ethnic minorities, and 25% of their patient populations, their clients, et cetera, need to come from these communities. I'm also excited to share with you that because we recognize that we are a country of immigrants, and we're also in a time of incredible global connection, that it's necessary for our students themselves, these burgeoning mental health professionals, to appreciate the global nature of our world. So we offer transformative opportunities that expose, inform, and deepen our students' cultural awareness and sensitivity. And these are opportunities, international opportunities that prepare them for careers to meet the growing needs and demand of underserved communities locally and around the globe. So on an annual basis before COVID, we took, and we will again, hopefully in 2023, we travel to Ecuador, Guyana, where I'm from, Haiti, Kenya, Trinidad, and Vietnam. And we partner with organizations, academic institutions in those countries to do some form of mental health service work. In Guyana, my work focuses on suicide prevention, and it's been incredibly important work to be able to do that back home and with my students too. So the second strategy that I wanted to share with you that we have implemented is to really create culturally inclusive spaces through mentorship and professional enrichment. So to ensure our students' development as thoughtful professionals who are engaged and interested in social change, we provide 10 to 12 didactic seminars, workshops, conferences, colloquia on an annual basis. And these all generally focus on underserved communities. We also want to make sure that we highlight that diversity is fun. So we have sociocultural activities that are meant to really foster our students' sense of belongingness. And that's especially true for students who are coming from backgrounds that have been historically excluded from academic settings. And we are intentional about fostering a sense of connection across our students so that we can address any experience of isolation that they might have in a predominantly white academic setting. So these are a few examples of the conferences and workshops that we hold at the Multicultural Center. As you can see, we've partnered with Massachusetts Department of Mental Health, to conduct workshops focused on mental health stigma within communities of color. We've done workshops focusing on men of color, including men of color and boys of color who've experienced sexual abuse. We have hosted conferences on Asian mental health to highlight the underserved nature of many Asian communities in terms of the provision of culturally informed mental health services. So we've been incredibly proud of the support that we've had from the Boston community in attending these events. To ensure that underrepresented students are well integrated into our college environment, to ensure that they feel supported, we developed social change mentorship programs as well as student-led affinity groups. And in 2016, I developed the first of these programs, the Black Mental Health Graduate Academy. And this is a leadership pipeline program, which is designed to increase the recruitment as well as retention of Black students, and particularly individuals who are invested in becoming leaders in the psychology and mental health counseling fields. Within the Academy, we're very intentional about providing opportunities to be mentored, and it's a very specific type of mentorship. It's mentorship that is meant to be socioculturally focused on repairing some of the devastating experiences that many Black students face due to racial microaggressions, due to racism in the classroom, in clinical placements, et cetera. So I'm happy to share with you that since our inauguration, we've had 59 individuals who have been scholars in the Academy. 60% of them are immigrants and second generation Americans from the Caribbean and from Africa. And last year, 2021, we graduated our largest cohort of pioneering scholars, 14 individuals who graduated as psychologists and mental health counselors. So we were incredibly proud of their accomplishments and their success. We are also incredibly grateful to the American Psychological Association, which provided the Academy with an award in recognition of our innovative efforts to recruit and retain racial ethnic minority students. Okay, so building on the success of the Center for Multicultural and Global Mental Health, last year, we inaugurated our Center for Workforce Development, which is led by Dr. Jemima St. Louis, who's an Associate Vice President at William James College. She also happens to be one of my mentors. And the Center for Workforce Development really reflects the third and fourth strategies that I'd like to highlight to you. This center houses a number of federal grants that we've received in the past 2 to 3 years. And those are grants that largely focus on, they're largely training grants focused on improving the care that's provided to underserved communities. So I'll tell you a little bit more about those strategies that we've engaged in with the support of the Center for Workforce Development. Strategy 3 and 4 are to provide financial support and promote careers in underserved communities. And those are two strategies that are very, very, very associated with each other. And if you have any questions, please ask me to expand further on what I mean. William James College has a long-standing commitment to providing financial support to students who are coming from historically marginalized backgrounds. And in 2016, students from disadvantaged background made up about 7% of our student body. By 2018, that had risen significantly to 28% of our student body. And that's in large part because of the culturally focused academic concentrations that we've developed, the mentorship programs that we've developed, as well as the financial support that we have committed ourselves to providing to talented students who deserve a space at the table. So I would like to share with you one such mechanism, financial mechanism that we have. In 2017, William James College made its most significant and largest financial commitment to recruiting and retaining student leaders from disadvantaged backgrounds by instituting the Serving the Mental Health Needs of the Underserved Scholarship. This is a recruitment tool, and it is stewarded by myself and my 4 other colleagues who direct and lead the Multicultural Center. What you're looking at here is a slide that has a few photographs of some of our amazingly talented awardees. The purpose of this scholarship is to recruit students who are committed to pursuing careers in which they provide culturally informed mental health and organizational wellness services to historically underserved communities and groups. From 2017 to 2022, William James College committed $1.6 million to fund this particular scholarship. I wanted to also share with you that the scholarship covers 2/3 of the tuition cost of our awardees. We currently have 27 awardees. By the end of the year, that will increase because we are currently reviewing applications for the scholarship. 81% of our awardees of the scholarship are people of color, and it's been incredibly helpful in attracting and enrolling ambitious future leaders in our fields who are dedicated to reducing mental health disparities in communities that have been historically neglected. And we're incredibly proud of them. They're incredibly inspiring people. I now want to emphasize and share with you what we've been doing in terms of retention. When you're embarking on a process of changing an institution, embarking in processes where you are recruiting individuals from backgrounds that have been historically excluded from our fields, it's really important for us to also pay very close, deliberate attention on how we retain and support those individuals. So we've done so in a number of different ways. I want to emphasize one particular way that we've been able to do this. Due to this incredible success of the Multicultural Center in recruiting more racial ethnic minority students, in 2020, myself, along with Dr. Jemima St. Louis, were awarded $3 million for the clinical psychology program. Our counseling program was also awarded another $3 million by the Health Resources and Services Administration. And those grants are meant to diversify the workforce by retaining first-generation students, as well as students who are from low-income backgrounds. The intention of those grant mechanisms are to support students financially so that they can have the freedom to build careers in which they will serve medically underserved communities or work in primary care settings where many people of color and underserved communities oftentimes seek care. Just briefly, I want to highlight to you just a quick story about this. In 2015, I began working on this grant mechanism with the intention of WJC submitting an application to HRSA. However, it became very clear that we would not meet the eligibility criteria for the level of diversity among our student body that was necessary. I was also informed by the program officer for this grant mechanism that yes, we did not have in 2015 a sufficiently high level of diversity among our student body, particularly racial ethnic diversity. So we then proceeded to develop the Multicultural Center and the academic concentration programs focused on cultural groups that have been underserved. And what's happened is that those groups, as well as the mentorship programs, have acted as powerful recruitment mechanisms for individuals from historically underrepresented groups, as well as individuals from historically marginalized communities. So as a consequence of us building those programs in very intentional ways, I also want to highlight that we built those programs on empirically supported recommendations of HRSA for career pipeline programs. So we depended on HRSA's wisdom as we built those programs. And as a consequence of us doing that, 5 years later, we had been able to successfully increase the level of racial ethnic diversity among our student population enough for us to even be eligible for this particular grant mechanism. And not only obviously were we eligible, but we were successful at receiving $6 million to continue to do the work that's necessary to diversify the behavioral health workforce. The scholarships that we've received allows us to support 20 students in each department on an annual basis, and it provides coverage for $32,000 of their tuition cost. And for the program that I'm the associate director for and co-PI on, the STAR Fellowship, which is the Specialized Training Academic Retention Fellowship, that's a program that's in the clinical psychology program. 96% of our STAR fellows are from racial ethnic minority backgrounds. Okay. In addition to providing financial support, all of our programs provide mentorship and provide a focus on leadership. More recently, over the past year, we've instituted a social change mentoring and leadership training certificate program, and that is led by Gabrielle Palmer, who is the coordinator of mentorship and workforce development programs at William James College. And I wanted to emphasize Gabby because she was a student at William James College. She was also a scholar in the Black Mental Health Graduate Academy. And her ascension to this role really highlights our commitment to developing those career pipelines for talented individuals. With the work that we do, scholarship and stipend recipients in our programs are provided with faculty mentoring, and that mentoring is meant to really provide political guidance to our students to help them successfully navigate spaces that they're unfamiliar with in predominantly white academic institutions. We also ask that our recipients of the scholarships and stipends give back and pay it forward. So they also provide mentorship to undergraduate students at William James College. Okay, so as we wrap up, I am delighted to share with you our newest initiative, which I have the pleasure of directing, and it's our Teaching Faculty Fellowship. We know that underrepresented faculty remain disproportionately low compared to our representation in the national population. For example, Black faculty members are about 4%, Latinx, another 4%, Native American, 0.4%. And this is a significant underrepresentation in comparison to our population rates. We also know from research that faculty diversity is essential, that faculty diversity is necessary for enriching students' academic achievements and promoting their cognitive development as well as their critical thinking skills. So we have committed ourselves to developing this Teaching Faculty Fellowship, which is meant to allow us to foster a critical mass of exceptionally talented and well-trained faculty members who are historically underrepresented in academic settings. We will be providing those fellows with innovative, paradigm-shifting, inclusive, pedagogical, advising, leadership, and research training in order for them to be future leaders, faculty leaders, dedicated to social change. So we're very excited about this new initiative. So as I wrap up, I wanted to share with you a quote that comes from the American Psychological Association's Multicultural Guidelines. And it says, psychologists are in a position to provide leadership as agents of pro-social change, advocacy, and social justice, thereby promoting societal understanding, affirmation, and appreciation of multiculturalism against the damaging effects of individual, institutional, and societal racism, prejudice, and all forms of oppression based on stereotyping and discrimination. And we do our best at William James College to follow that line. I want to share with you as I end here that we recognize that WJC's growing success in diversifying the behavioral health workforce and increasing culturally informed care puts lie to the common disingenuous lamentations that are oftentimes put forth by many institutional leaders about the difficulties of diversifying student bodies and the difficulties of diversifying faculty. The problem is not a lack of people of color being in the academic or training pipeline, sorry. We're there. So we need to really stop the lamentations and really commit instead to the empirically established benefits that we all experience when we invite everyone to the party and when we welcome them to dance. WJC has demonstrated that when you build it, they will come. So I'll share another critical quote from the APA that says, psychology should not reflect the ills of society, but rather be a model for what society should be, a place where diversity is mainstreamed and where mutual appreciation exists for the contributions of all. As I wrap up, I can't end without acknowledging that our successes are due in large part to the humble allyship of Dr. Nicholas Covino, William James College's president. He has been a powerful social justice ally to those of us who have led this work on diversifying the behavioral health workforce, as well as addressing disparities in our field. He represents to me a Black immigrant woman, a powerful example of how to use white male privilege effectively to dismantle oppressive systems and empower needed social change. I also have been incredibly blessed with heroes and mentors at the University of Rochester, as well as the University of Rochester Medical Center, who respected me, encouraged me, nurtured me, inspired me. They include Dr. Catherine Cerulli, Dr. Nancy Talbot, Dr. Sherry Toth, Dr. Paul Duberstein, Ken Connor, Eric Kane, Yates Conwell, and Dr. Brenda Lee. I'm incredibly grateful for them. I'm forever indebted to them, not only because they ensured the wonderful career that I enjoy, they also shaped the mentor that I am today. I also would like to express my humble gratitude to Drs. Rosenberg, Dr. Cross, Dr. Olivares, and Nestra, who invited me to today's Grand Rounds and who assisted me in preparing for it. Thank you so much for your time. I look forward to any questions that you might have for me.
Wow. Thank you. Thank you very much, Dr. Cort. That was absolutely fantastic. I feel like I need to get in my car and drive east to William James College and enroll. That was like, I would have loved to have had a program like this when I was training. A really exciting work. And you have moved it so much further since I last spoke to you. You are always going. It's wonderful to see what you've done with your career and how you've really enriched everybody else's life here. There is a question from Dr. Deborah King. Thank you, Natalie, for this inspiring presentation. It's so heartwarming to see how much you've accomplished since leaving us. Given your knowledge of our own challenges here in Rochester, to recruit and retain diverse students and faculty, are there any ways in which you would tweak or emphasize particular strategies that you share to fit our situation? For example, given that our community is not major urban center, such as Boston, and has such a profound history of racial challenges.
Sure. Oh my goodness. Thank you, Dr. King. Dr. King was definitely one of those amazing mentors for me, someone who I admired greatly and was definitely a possibility model for me. So thank you for this lovely question. I loved Rochester. I still dream about Rochester, being back in Rochester. So I left Rochester because I couldn't do the work that I have just shared with you. If the University of Rochester had committed to seriously engaging in this work, I would still be there. I would still be there contributing to an amazing college, an amazing university, an amazing medical center that I owe a lot to. So for me, I don't think that what we have done at William James College is unique or uniquely difficult. This really is about, one, having individuals in power who are willing to ally themselves with those of us who are committed to social change. And it's about recognizing that for those of us who are in leadership, that we also must do the work to excavate our own biases, which are preventing us from leaning in to very obvious ways that we can address disparities. So for me, I represent one of those individuals who could have continued a career at the U of R, would have happily done so, had bought my house there, would have happily done so, but for the significant blind spot and the lack of willingness to commit to this work. So one of the things I'd also emphasize too, as I mentioned before, the programs that we've developed are based on recommendations from HRSA. HRSA has been incredibly helpful in detailing what they have seen be effective in developing career pipeline programs. And these are programs across the entire country. Programs in rural settings, programs in metropolitan settings, programs where there's significant multicultural representation, programs where there's in communities where there's not. So that's definitely one place that I would start by examining, reviewing what HRSA has found that works in those settings. But again, I don't think it's a matter of us not necessarily knowing how to do this work. I think it's largely a matter of true emotional commitment to diversity, true emotional commitment. We oftentimes have intellectually committed, but not necessarily fully emotionally committed to change.
Thank you for that. Caroline, did you have a question for Dr. Cort?
Yes, actually, Deborah King's question was very similar to my own, and I think Natalie mostly answered what I was going to ask. But it was about, I guess I was curious about if you had early challenges from leadership at your college when it came to you needing to advocate, and what were those challenges and how did you overcome them?
Great question. This is a country, as I highlighted, and as we all know, has built itself in centuries of racial oppression. And that racial oppression has been incredibly beneficial to many, many, many people, many institutions, many organizations. So it's important for us to recognize that any attempts to shift what has been fully, completely embedded in those systems will absolutely face resistance. We'll face subtle resistance, we'll face direct resistance. So my colleagues and I absolutely have been on the receiving end of the subtle and direct resistance. And it's painful. It's painful, it's frustrating, it can be demoralizing. This is one of the reasons that I emphasized our sisterhood. I think it's really quite necessary if you're attempting to embark on this type of work in an institution that has been, whether neglectful, intentionally, or deliberately uninterested in diversifying. You have to find a community. You have to find others who have a similar clear intention. You have to find others who will not only inspire you, but remind you of your courage so that you can keep fighting. So that's one of our strategies that's been really quite powerful. we stay connected to each other, and we stay connected to our intention. We utilize our mentorship across our relationships. Dr. Nicholas Cavino, the president of our college, has been the most significant leader who has allied with us and who has encouraged us, and to whom, many of us, including myself, go to when we are faced with the resistance. So you need somebody who has access to power and privilege, and who actually wants to use it for good, and who's also willing to move aside and let those of us who are experts in this space do what's necessary to do the work and to move this mission forward. So I have great admiration and great appreciation for his humility in that. So those are definitely two critical aspects of this process that's really helped me manage that resistance. You must expect it. Don't be surprised by it. You can't have 4 centuries of something being fully enmeshed, where, again, there's benefit, there's financial, there's economic, there's political benefit to maintaining the continued white supremacy that has defined this country. So don't be surprised by resistance. Expect it, and make sure that you are shoring yourself up with others who understand that resistance and who are willing to still continue moving forward. Lastly, what I would say is that I'm grateful for the resistance. I think part of that is because I'm generally an optimist, but I am grateful for the resistance because it required us to be very, very, very smart. It required us to think outside the box. When one obstacle is put in front of you, you could lay down and give up, or you could figure out how to get over, get around, get under that obstacle. So in essence, and I'm not saying that I call and welcome resistance, but what we've been able to do is utilize the resistance we faced in ways that, unintentionally, on the part of our resistors, made our programs stronger, more effective, because we had to anticipate or respond to that resistance.
That is so
Wow.
inspiring. Thank you.
Thank you, Natalie. I'm sure that your ability to write and obtain grants help break down some of that resistance.
You're absolutely right. We've received about $14 million in the last couple of years, specifically as a consequence of the initiatives that we've engaged in. So yes, listen, it's important to be practical, right? It's important to not only emotionally connect to this important work, because people deserve to be provided with ethical, responsible, thoughtful, kind care. But I'm also practical, and we've demonstrated that diversity actually is positive in lots of ways, including financially.
Well, thank you very much for this really inspiring presentation. I hope that at least one person that attended today will take it to heart, reach out to you, and really think about creating and breaking down barriers here in Rochester. Thank you so much, Natalie.
Thank you so much for having me. Thank you to the audience. I appreciate being here. Thank you. Wishing you all the best.
Likewise.